Welcome to the third episode of the Dive In series, and today I've got Ben Pritchard here, a seven-time indoor world record holder and a Paralympic world record holder as well, from Wales, so a southwest man himself, and a new father to his beautiful little girl. And so yeah, this is Ben. Ben, say hi.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, India.
No, thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, I've literally got, like I said to you just before we hit record, so many questions. But I guess the first one would kind of be to tell people who are listening. Obviously, it's a very big question to start with, but just kind of a little run through about where you started in the Gower to where you are now. And that is obviously a very big first question, but just to kind of give people a bit of an overview would be amazing.
So I guess I'll answer that in reverse so people can tune out when they want to. But I'm a returning Tokyo Paralympian. I had a bronze at last year's World Championships and started Paralympic rowing in 2017 following a cycling accident, which left me paralysed from just above the waist down. And obviously you hear that it's from a cycling accident. So prior to that, I was a big cyclist and a big triathlete. And I mean, growing up on the Gower, going to university in Wales, the outdoors was every part of my life. The Gower's got some great rides, and I went to Bangor University in Snowdon. So yeah, every weekend or every night I was out in Snowdonia National Park on my bike. So the bike played a huge part of my upbringing. And I guess that's where my first interaction with TrueStart happened. I know we'll get onto that later, but I feel like I've seen TrueStart evolve just as much as I have, from riding around on two wheels to living my life on four. It's quite nice to come full circle and be back here talking to you guys today.
Yeah, I'm so excited. When I don't know if you met Ben Smith, so Ben Smith, he gave me the inspiration to do this, and immediately Hels and Simon and Ben were like, you need to speak to Ben. So yeah, buzzing to have you, I guess. And that kind of is my second question is, how did you come to meet Helena and Simon and come across TrueStart in the beginning?
So when I was at university, I'd qualified to represent British triathlon at the age group European and World Championships, placed fourth and something respectively. And but to get there, it's all self-funded. So when I went to the European Champs, I'd had a lot of support from family. Mum and dad had helped bank mum and dad, and was very fortunate for that. But basically, I got to the point where I could no longer. I'd reached my overdraft limit basically with the parents, and had to try and work out what we could do going forward. And when I went to the European Champs, I met a couple of people: Dan Bigham, Sam Brand, Dean Watson, Tom Stead, and Owen Mitchell. And we kind of just clicked instantly, and we became really good friends. And we're still in like a group chat today, and we still talk now. And we're all doing different things. Three of them are still involved in cycling. Tom's a dad and working full time, and obviously I'm now a rower. But we were like clubbing together some ideas on who we could approach to sponsor us and provide product, cash, whatever it may be. And I can't remember who found TrueStart first, but somebody found this company TrueStart that was a triathlon caffeine brand. And we all liked coffee, and we all could see the benefits of caffeine in sport and how we could maximize our potential using caffeine. And at the time, TrueStart's focus was on guaranteeing 19.5 milligrams of caffeine per scoop. So as an athlete, that was like vital information, that you knew you could have 2 scoops of caffeine to boost your performance legally, depending on your body weight. And obviously they've moved away from that now, but that was my first interaction. And it was back when the packaging was like a packet, and then it went to the tin with the eyes on it, and then now we're at the dive in stage, right? And at the time, Hels was working in the city, and I was working in Lloyd's of London, and we just hit it off, And I think we liked that Hels and Simon were also triathletes, and also got that version of the story. Like they understood that we were students or newly into work and struggling, and they were obviously starting a startup and struggling, but also triathletes and enjoying sport. And we kind of just clubbed together, and whilst there wasn't a lot of cash available, and understandably so, there was support at every hurdle, be it decisions about leaving work or product or whatever it was. We could have those honest and open conversations, and I think that's where the relationship just like flourished, right? Because Hels and Simon could test their product on us, ask us our feedback, we could provide it, and then it just, you know, evolved and evolved and evolved and evolved. And it's great now to see where they are, because the amount of work they put in behind the scenes, people won't realize, but it's it's a, you know, project passion or passion project, you know, for them.
Yeah, I had no idea that it was from back there. 'Cause I knew it was in the sporty TrueStart place, but I didn't realise it was all in like the city, and it was with Dan and everyone like that. That's so cool.
Yeah, I think our first interaction was 2011 or 2012, so it was really early days. But yeah, it's we've all grown a lot since then. Obviously, Dan's now our record holder on the velodrome. Sam's a professional cyclist with Team Novo Nordisk. Dean represents a team up in the northwest. You know, it's pretty exciting to see where we've all gone to.
It's like you've all, you like you say, you're all doing separate things, but you're absolutely smashing it in your different parts of life and sport or coffee or whatever you're doing. Because on your Instagram bio, it literally says coffee obsessed. And did that start before TrueStart? Was it kind of, did that like kick everything off? And I guess have you met like a cool community through coffee, because it's such a social thing?
Yeah, so it 100% wasn't a thing before TrueStart. I liked coffee, you know, but I would, you know, Kenko Millicano was probably the extent where I'd go to. And then obviously being an athlete, meeting TrueStart, delving into the science behind it, that really piqued my interest. And that really helped me dive into the world of coffee. And then you work with Hels and Simon, and then you understand it a little bit more, and then you go for it. And that's kind of where TrueStart, I guess, I blame for my coffee addiction, not in terms of the caffeine addiction, but in fact the fact that I now can't just go and have a Starbucks or a Costa or a normal coffee, because for me it's more than that. You said earlier it's a massively social thing, and there's a huge community behind it, and it's so true. You know, I will have a flat white or a black coffee or a pour over, but it's not just that. I have it with friends. I sit down, I read a book. It's my time. And what I like about coffee is that everyone can have a different flavor profile that they like, or a different method that they like, but ultimately you're drinking the same drink. And from there, when I left the city in 2018 and I moved home to Wales, I moved to Ammanford, and obviously Coaltown are based in Ammanford, and it's where I met Megs. It's where, you know, who's now my wife, who's now the mother of my daughter. So for me, coffee's provided me so much more than just a drink. So I am coffee obsessed.
Yeah, I was actually another thing was I was going to ask how you met Meg and where you met Meg. So it was back home.
Back home in Wales after my accident, which people are like, "Oh, did you not know her before?" And I said no. And one of the greatest things about Meg is it's never been the wheelchair. You know, like it's always been me. And I said it in our wedding vows, but ever since the moment I met her, she was only interested in me. Most people ask about the 2 seconds of my life that changed my life forever. But to her, they didn't enter her mouth until, I don't know, we were almost engaged before she asked me questions about my accident. And that was just so refreshing, because every media interview you do, or every new person you speak to, or every taxi you get into, people just want to know why you're in a wheelchair. People don't want to know about what you're doing now or what you did before. You know, I had a fairly successful career before, and I definitely have a successful career now, but it was really nice to meet somebody that just wasn't interested. It was really refreshing to have somebody that just wanted to speak to me, about what I do now, what I did, what my dreams were, you know. And that all happened in a coffee shop.
I can't believe it was in a coffee shop, but I mean, I think it is. I think it's really sad. That's always the first question, and that must have been so nice to have Meg just not even think about it,
just not phase. And then obviously the life of an athlete on top of that, is a difficult one. We're away for a lot of the year. You know, I'm away at the moment for 6 weeks with 2 days at home. I'm away for 3 weeks earlier in the season, and I'm racing. You know, there's a large chunk of my time where I'm not at home, and obviously that puts a strain on any relationship. But for Meg's, it's always been go and do it, chase your dreams, which I guess fits with the TrueStart method, like the ethos, right? Dive in and crack on. And yeah, it's just really refreshing to have something like that in your corner, and it's definitely needed sometimes.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I could what you were saying just before we hit record as well. That and I saw on your latest Instagram posts. I was going to ask you about this, like you being away at the moment in this quite stressful point in camps and stuff, and before your next massive event, which I will ask you to explain to everyone. But the section of the camp which is really hard, and you do need someone in your fighting corner who's got your back and is like go and do your thing. Go and smash it. And you've got it was Aaron, wasn't it? Who's your?
He was a performance lifestyle advisor. So in the GB setup, you have your coaches, you have your support staff, your physios, your biomechs, your physiologists, your nutritionists, whatever it may be. And then UK Sport also provide a performance lifestyle advisor, and that's to help athletes transition away from sport once they're done, but also to manage life. What was cool with Aaron was that we've raced each other on our bikes prior to him being a PL, and he's a cyclist. So again, it's one of those things that you meet people in life and sometimes you just click. And with Aaron, I like to think that we just clicked and had that shared passion of cycling and coffee, because he actually invested in a coffee shop in Ireland. But so we had these shared interests, and we could just. So I sat down with him, and for the people that don't follow my Instagram, basically said, I'm about to have a baby daughter, and unfortunately she's arriving at the time where it's the busiest in the year. She arrived right in the middle of race season. Now, for a blessing or a curse, I was injured for a large part of this season, so I was actually at home when Eva was here, which was, everything happens for a reason. And I spoke to him about how difficult this period would be, because if I wasn't injured when she was here, I would have been home for 5 days, away for 2 weeks, home for a week, away for 2 weeks, home for 3 days, away, home for 2 weeks, and then away for 6 weeks. So I just would never have built a bond with my baby. Or at this stage, babies change so quickly, you feel like you would never catch up with the changes. And I know there are people that serve our country and have to live away, or people that choose to live away, or people that choose to work away, and that's their choice. But for me, that was a big thing. And I'm very family focused and family orientated, and I struggle actually living in Berkshire because my family live in South Wales. So part of my program is I try to get home for a bit of a mental release, as much as I can, because I like to be around my family. So when I started my own family, I knew instantly that I was going to have some time with baby Eva. So I sat down with Aaron and I was like, what do I do? I know it's going to be challenging. I know it's going to be tough. I'm going to be away for 6 weeks. What do you think is the best thing to do? And he said, well, like I said in the Instagram post, he was like, take them with you. I was like, you can't do that. That's never been done. And he was like, why? Just ask the question. British rowing, I hesitated, but British rowing have been so supportive throughout pregnancy and also after Eva's been here. They've allowed me to move my training sessions sometimes around midwife appointments, flexibility when Eva was here. And then when I said about bringing her out to training camp, they were like, yes, we can't financially support you, but we can support you with time and flexibility to have her there. And honestly, having done lots of training programs without having family out there or near you, and having done one with the 3 most important ladies in my life there, my mum, Megs and Eva, it was night and day. And going forward, it's definitely something I will do for that work camp, because it just meant that almost gave me that extra boost for the hard sessions. I could invest harder into them because I knew that afterwards I'd have my family and I'd be able to spend some time with them. Because, people always say, oh, you must get to see some nice places. And I do. I see some beautiful places in the world. But the reality of a training camp normally is hotel room, where I am now, training venue, hotel restaurant, hotel room. There's not a lot of flexibility around that. And because you're there to do a job, right? You're there to perform, you're there to train. But having my family there meant that even when they came to the hotel, I just felt like I was released and that I was away from that kind of stress bubble or pressure cooker.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I actually got a lot more out of myself in the last 4 weeks than I have done previously on any of those counts. So yeah, I was
Yeah.
really grateful for Aaron to say that.
Because I feel like people glamorize like traveling for work or traveling for training and everything. And why did you hesitate? Why did you think that maybe it would be something that would be quite tricky?
I just thought they'd say no.
Mm.
Part of my values, I studied law as an undergrad and a master's, so I live life very fairly black and white. You know,
Yeah.
so for me, if somebody says these are the rules, I tend to follow them and I tend to stick to them, and I don't really like deviation from that. So for me, that was a big no. It's never been done in the para squad, so it was a huge deviation from the norm, and I hesitated because I thought, well, I don't want to be the one to cause issue. But actually, as soon as I went for the meeting, it was like, yeah, absolutely, that makes sense, no worries. And it was just like, oh wow, that's so supportive.
Yeah.
And obviously, we've got the big dog Helen Glover, who has kind of set the standard for that, because Helen Glover's back with the women's squad. She's got 3 kids. You know, she was a breastfeeding mum when she came back for Tokyo. So she's kind of shown British rowing that you can do both. So to have her and also have her support when it comes down to that is been great, because I've had somebody that I can go and speak to and be like, how do you deal with training difficult, really hard training, and also going home and being a mum, or going
Yeah.
home and being, obviously in my case, a dad? Because and I look at my two, I kind of think this is a new chapter of Benjamin Pritchard, the athlete, because the last Benjamin Pritchard, prior to Eva's arrival, would go to training, pick up a bit of admin work, play on the PlayStation 5 for a lot of the day. Meg would come home, cook dinner, go to bed, repeat, right?
Yeah.
And I had so much Ben time to do with what I wanted, and you felt so recovered because you had all that time. Whereas now, the new chapter of Ben is, I go to training, I come home, and you want to relieve Megan from mum duty because she's been with the baby all day, so you're not getting the same recovery. And it was a really interesting. I was having a conversation with the psychologist about it, because I was like, I know that I need to have half an hour nap to get the recovery in. But also, my favourite part of the day is going through that door and taking the baby away from Meg, because I've obviously missed my baby, and it sounds really soppy, but it's the truth, right? And it's my favourite part of the day to go home and have a cuddle, and I really enjoy that. I always knew I wanted to be a father, and I don't want to be an absent father. I want to be as heavily invested as I can be. So for me, it's a trade-off of psychologically knowing I need to rest and I need to be an athlete, but also being like, no, I need to be a dad. And so I spoke to Helen about it, and she said, you just got to compartmentalize. When you leave British rowing, you're no longer a rower, you're now dad. And you need to and when you're home, you can't think about rowing. When you're at rowing, you can't think about the baby, because you won't be doing anyone a good service otherwise.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I was going to say, with Helen being kind of a bit of a mentor, essentially, around this, and I think it is a new space, isn't it? About Serena, give different sport, but Serena Williams, and when she came back, literally straight after, I think that there's so many other athletes, but I think a lot of people have always said, oh, once you, and especially with women's sport as well, once you have a kid, you're done. And I was wondering if there were any little nuggets of advice.
The other bit of advice I'd give to any aspiring athlete and or current athlete that may be planning parenthood or family life is that don't plan it around your sport. These moments are life moments. They're not sporting accolades. They're not sporting achievements. If your sport values you and you value your sport, you'll be back there. And UK Sport only last year introduced a maternity policy. How crazy is that? Only last year there was a maternity policy for female athletes in the UK sport system. So prior to that, a lot of female athletes would have to plan when they were having children around racing schedules. Obviously, it's a massive step forward, right? So we can't dwell on the fact that it was only last year, but we can applaud them for introducing it.
Yeah.
And what it means now is that female athletes feel protected, that they can take a year out of sport, be financially sound, and also know that if they want to come back to the sport will look after them or will help them do that. And there's a lot of research going on at the moment about the paternity element of that. And I was saying that actually the flexibility with no paternity policy is that British rowing have been able to be really flexible with me and support me. And I feel so supported by my sport. You know?
Yeah.
So it's fantastic.
I think so, and it is important to remember that it's obviously the sport that is like it's your love and it's your passion, but it is your job. And in any other job, you'd expect to be supported as well. So just because you're an athlete doesn't mean it should be any different. And
You
yeah,
hit the nail on the head there. So athletes, I always say to like my family and my friends that I'm going to work, because for me it's a job, right? What I'm doing, I love it. Don't get me wrong, you know. And people say that if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life, right? Well, I love what I do, and I'm very lucky to do what I do. And I know that it takes skill and all that kind of thing, and you can't just be a professional runner if you haven't got the je ne sais quoi or whatever you want to call it. But it is ultimately a job. So
yeah,
when people say like, "Oh, well, can't you just take that Saturday off?" I'm like, "No, because I've got to work." And then people just understand, and it takes the pressure off family then for feeling bad about me not being able to be at family events or occasions or celebrations. So what you said there about how people should feel supported because it's a job is so true. I fully support that. So
yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. That's really awesome that your family, because like again, if you were having to just work late, or if you booked in for us, if you booked in a shift or an event on a Saturday, it would just be a done deal. Like everyone would just be like, okay, fair enough, they've got work. And you talking about loving rowing, I've got some questions about the I Am Able film that you did, but the bit which was really interesting was the fact that you said for the first time you got on a rowing machine, you hated it. So and now you love it. So what was it that made you go from hating it to loving it? Because I do agree that whenever I get on the rowing machine, it's that pulling a chain back and forth, and
I still don't think I love the rowing machine. So I definitely love rowing on the water, but it was, I guess it was, for me, it was like taking me back to a time trial bike, because
yeah,
you in a time trial bike, you're in a position where you're looking at the numbers, you're holding a certain wattage, and you're going for a certain time, and it's all about data, numbers, and you can analyze that on the go. And there's obviously a bit of feel in it, but a lot of the time you can do it off numbers. And when you're rowing, you can't help but look at the screen. The screen is right in front of you, less than a meter away, and you just stare at the numbers. And I think that's my addictive personality, or my data personality, is that. So for me, it like really ticks. And I love sitting in front of an ergo. But what made me stick with rowing, and I think it says it in the I Am Able video, that was when I tried it on the water for the first time, I was obviously newly injured. And whilst my wheelchair is, you know, a massive mobility tool, and it gives me the freedom to live my life and travel, and you know, obviously I've got a privately purchased one which costs a lot of money, but it's really light and it can go on an airplane, and you know, all those things. It's a very stark reminder of the fact you're disabled. And a lot of the other sports I did, you were wheelchair tennis, wheelchair basketball, wheelchair rugby, wheelchair fencing, wheelchair athletics. You had to be in a wheelchair. Whereas with rowing, I'm in an adapted seat, but I'm in a rowing boat, and you get out of your wheelchair. So when I row, even now, even, you know, when I started rowing 2017, 2018, 2019, 21, 22, 23, 5 years later, 6 years later, I'm still getting the same feeling that I watch my wheelchair disappear, and I get like I don't know, like a butterflies in my stomach, or like a tingling of freedom, you know, even if it's for an hour a day. You know, I might whinge and moan about the sessions because they're hard, but the feeling doesn't change. The feeling of making my wheelchair disappear. And I think when I do eventually hang up my oars or my blades, that is probably one thing I'll struggle with the most, is that release of being out of the wheelchair.
Yeah. And do you, when you hang up your oars and stuff, and if you stop doing it professionally, like, would you still be doing this as a hobby? Would you go back and do something on the water? But also, would you keep looking for that like release and freedom bit after you stop being a professional athlete?
Yeah, I had a joke with my brother-in-law today, actually. He put a post up about how sport's not always about beating personal bests. It's not always about driving for, you know, winning medals, etc., etc., etc. It's just simply about getting out there, moving, and self-care. And I was like, I replied, mate, you must be joking. when I retire, I'm going to be on a golf course with a big cigar. And he said, you'll never stop doing sport. And I was just like, you're right.
Yeah,
He's so right, because sport is me. I love coffee and I'm a coffee fan, but ultimately, whenever I've had troubles or life-changing moments or just difficulties studying, revising, whatever it may be, I would get on my bike and I'd go out and get a mental refresh, or I'd play hockey with the boys, or I'd go rowing, and it
yeah,
would make you feel that bit better. So will I continue to do sport? Yes. Will it be in a rowing boat? I don't know. Am I
yeah,
ready to try some new things? Yeah. I really want to try some wheelchair tennis. I want to try and do a power triathlon. There are loads of things I've got on my bucket list to do. But in the same vein, selfishly, a lot of the last 7 years or 5 years have been about me. And there'll be a lot of payback to give to family, friends, and all that kind of stuff. And I know they'll say you don't owe us anything. And I feel incredibly guilty that a lot of Meg's life is built around my sport,
yeah.
So I think whilst I'll do it casually, I don't know whether I'll do stuff competitively post rowing.
You smashed it when you were saying that sport is a massive relief. You can tell when people are pent up because they've not gone out for a walk or a run or a swim or anything, which just does get you outdoors. But I can also imagine with your data brain and your like analyzing brain, it would be quite hard to, I guess, go back to a sport that you constantly analysed and do that
Yeah.
constantly.
And I used to surf growing up. And when I was a triathlete or a cyclist, surfing was that thing for me where I would just get in the water or go for a swim in the sea, and it would reset my brain, because it was the one sport I could do where I wasn't looking at numbers. And I never, ever, ever wanted to do a surfing competition because I wanted to make it my hobby. Whereas every other sport I've done has been pretty serious or serious involvement. So yeah, it would be hard to go. It would be hard to go rowing, and just obviously as you become less fit or older and or just not on the high performance pathway anymore, your numbers will obviously drop, and that'll be hard to swallow as well. So I think I will continue moving, but what that moving looks like, I don't know. One of my friends actually set up a disabilities surf school in South Wales. So Ben, I used to lifeguard on the beaches, and then when I had my accident, Swampy used to say, like, come on, we'll get you in the water, we'll get you in the water. And it's just kind of been that fear of it not being the same, which is why I haven't. But once I retire, I'm definitely going to go down and take him up on his offer of some lessons and get back
Yeah,
on a board. I did in 2017. I went para skiing in Breckenridge with my family, and that was unreal. That was the
what
closest
does
thing
that
I've had to
feel like?
surfing. It was the closest thing to doing a cutback on a wave or that I've ever had. You're so low to the snow, and the turning's very similar, and it's so like flowy, and it's so chill. And I was like, yes, this could be my moving without
Yeah.
data-driven sports. The issue is when I'm on a UK sport contract, I can't do sports that risk injury in my sport. So I'm only allowed to ski once every 4 years. And after Tokyo, it was obviously still COVID, so I didn't get to go skiing. So me and the family are going back in 2025 for a big ski trip.
To Breckenridge.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that'll be so cool. That'll be
Yeah,
amazing.
it is.
Do we
It's
reckon
probably
it's ever going to get on the skis, little baby skis?
absolutely, absolutely. We've got like a little skateboard now and a little thing because Megs is really sporty as well, and like a
Yeah.
bit of a skater girl, surfer girl. So it hopefully naturally ever will probably follow that pathway. Yeah, my brother did a season out there and became an adaptive ski instructor. So yeah, so he'll hopefully give Emma some lessons because he'll be a better instructor than I will be. So that'll be really good.
And with you saying
Yeah.
that you can't like switch off when you're always trying to do the next thing, with the I Am Able film, was that one of them? How did that come about? Why was that important for you to do that? And it was 2019, wasn't it? So that must have been only a couple of years after your accident.
So
So was that
it was filmed in 2018. So it was filmed in
2018?
2018, and it actually came about through TrueStart. This guy and a girl, Ed and Morgan. She did some advertising work for TrueStart, or did some filming for TrueStart. And they were at the time looking for like a social enterprise. So Hels and Simon were like, well, we just had this mate who's had an accident. He's got a pretty wicked story. Would you be interested in doing a little video? And I Am Able was born. And the video still gets me. When my mum starts to get choked up in the kitchen.
Yeah, that was hard.
I use it for like when I do keynote addresses or motivational talks or whatever you want to call them. I play a section of the video, and I sit on the stage, and every single time I'm like trying to swallow because I'm about to cry. And obviously in the video, Mum says about she worries about what the future may bring because she doesn't know whether I can have children. And now this year, it's like, Mum, it's okay. Mum, it's okay. So we need to get another video filmed, I think. But yeah, it just came about through TrueStart. But yeah, I think it's just part of my personality. I've always lived in a sporty family. If you're into sports, you know, at a very young age, you get told about goals and setting a goal, short, medium, long-term goals, and it gets ingrained in you. You know, I started doing sport at 6 or 7 at the local sailing club, then the athletics club, then the triathlon club, then cycling, then hockey, then obviously now rowing. Yeah, so I've always been ingrained, goal orientated, and I guess for me, chasing that next best thing is part of that, because you're never happy. You know, on training camp in Italy, I set a lightning time in one of the pieces, and I was disappointed. And Nick was like, "Why?" My coach was like, "Why are you disappointed?" And I was like, "Well, you know, the guys are doing this speed, and I'm not near that speed." But for me, it was one of the best speeds I've ever done. So I guess it's just ingrained in me to always want and want and want and want. And I think that's the hardest part of like, off seasons or anything like that. And I guess that's where coffee comes into, because with coffee you can always learn something new, learn a new process, etc. Try a new technique, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I guess it slows it down a little bit as well. Because what you always wanting, because I think that it's kind of quite innate in high performance athletes, is like constantly wanting to better yourself. Or how do you find it, like trying to look at yourself and compete with yourself versus competing with other people in the camps? Like how do you do that?
That's a great question. I don't think it's helped by the system here. So in British rowing, we have these things called pieces, which is ultimately races internally over certain different distances, and you get marked on a percentage time, which the time is what they think will win the next gold medal at the Paralympics or Olympics.
Wow, that's
so
intense.
Whenever you do a piece on a Wednesday or a Saturday, you get marked against that time. Now, obviously, you see how you improve and you have your percentage, but also they rank it with all the other athletes in the building. Now, I'm fairly lucky that in our squad, there's only 2 PR1 males, and then everyone else is a different category. So whilst you can compete with them and they do push me on and they drive me forward, I know at the same time that they're a different category, so I don't have to keep chasing them.
Yeah.
And I'd say that on the flip side of that, British rowing is really good because we're integrated with the Olympic squad. I don't know of many systems or setups where the Paralympic guys and girls train alongside the able-bodied people. And internationally, our world championships are the same as the able-bodied world championships. Our European championships are the same as the able-bodied championships. We are fully integrated in world rowing and British rowing. And there's not many sports that can say that. I guess my event is getting quicker and quicker by the year at the moment. For example, before Tokyo 2021, no one broke 9:10. So the fastest guys in the world went 9:12. My Paralympic record was 9:14.6, and the world record is 9:12. So no one broke that. Whereas last year, 6 athletes went sub 9:10, and then this year, 3 athletes have gone sub 9 minutes. So it's just jumped exponentially. So I think in the back of my head, having had 2 surgeries this year, having had a baby girl, and also tried to rehab back to training, I'm chasing a field that's moving on a lot quicker than I have this year. The field is just like, oof. And it's a really good thing. You know, I see it as a challenge rather than something to worry about. May it mean that my positions are not as high as I'd like them to be, potentially, but you know, I've never gone sub 9:10, so if I do that this year, then fantastic.
Yeah. I guess it's really exciting for, like you say, the sport as a whole, because it's gathering so much momentum and it's getting more and more exciting, and that can only be a good thing. And when you first got your first world record, how long was that after you'd started rowing? And what did that feel like, having gone from being top of your game, like in triathlons and cycling, and then kind of knowing you're like top of your game in the world in rowing? Like, what did that feel like? And
It was in 2018 at the Welsh Indoor Championships.
Mhm.
And I remember moaning to my coach at the time, a lady called Ella Willett, who was the development coach of British Rowing at the time. And I was complaining because the time that was on the World Rowing website just seemed so unattainable. Like, I was questioning the guy's classification, and she was like, "Well, that's what it is. You can't change it. So if you're going to go for it, you've got to go for it." And I
Love
remember
it.
getting on the ergo and getting on the warm up machine and thinking, "I haven't got it today. Like, I've not got it in my legs, and then my arms, and then I got on the machine and then pulled and broke the world record." And I was just like, "Okay, yeah, like, you're making moves." And prior to that, um, I'd like sat down with the chief coach at Paralympic Rowing and said, "Do you see me going to Tokyo? I'm thinking about leaving my job in London because I'm finding living in London in the chair really difficult. So I'm going to go back to Wales. But if you see me going to Tokyo, I'll hang on because Reading is a lot closer to London than Wales. So it might be easier to like commute or make changes that way." And he said, "No, I don't see you going to Tokyo because of where you are in your journey." So I bought a house in Wales. I moved home. I got a new job. My life became far simpler.
Yeah,
Working hours dramatically reduced because of the industry that I was in. And then I guess had time to train and was happier in life. So it was getting better. And then that time came out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, you could do this actually, and a bit more buy-in from British Rowing into my development. And then I worked with a coach in Wales called Liz, and she really took me under her wing. And I think if it wasn't for Ella and Liz in those early days to believe in me and to invest wholeheartedly in me when maybe the chief coaches and performance coaches didn't think I was quite ready.
yeah,
They said I'd be a Paris athlete, but they didn't think I'd be a Tokyo athlete. For the development coaches to like really invest in me was massive, because if it wasn't for those two ladies, I wouldn't have had the confidence and I wouldn't have gone to trials and I wouldn't be where I am now.
yeah, yeah. And I guess you wouldn't have had that kick to be like, that's what you've got to beat. I know you can do it, and go do it.
Yeah. And I guess what's different between, people always ask me, well, how come you've got so many indoor records but no outdoor records? Well, one of my disabilities is that I have no lateral balance support.
Right.
So like I would flop side to side if I didn't have my arms on the table. My elbows are on the table.
Yeah.
Without that, I'd be flopping. So on an ergo, because it's fixed on land,
Mm,
I can apply all the power through my stroke because I'm not wobbling side to side.
yeah.
Whereas liquid is very, as we know, very movable.
Wobbly.
So yeah, I haven't quite found the way in which to apply all the power I can on the ergo to the boat. We're getting better and we're
Yeah.
getting closer, just not fully there yet.
Because what did
Yeah.
going back to like events and talking about Tokyo, when you got to Tokyo, what did that feel like, being a Paralympian? What was your kind of initial thought when you got in that boat?
I'm going to dog somebody out here, but my teammate and really good friend, Lauren Rolls, she pulled me up. I did an interview, and it must have been like one of my first ever interviews. And I called myself a power athlete, Paralympic athlete, or power athlete. And
Mm-hmm.
she said, "You're not one yet." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "You're not one. You've not gone to the Paralympic Games. You're not one." And I was like, "Interesting." And I remember voting for the heat. And when I got to the heat, I was like, "Now I'm a Paralympic athlete."
Yeah, yeah,
And 4 years after my accident, I'm now a Paralympic athlete. I've made it. I'm okay. And I didn't have my best race in the heat. And I think it was just that emotional tension of everything that's happened in those 4 years, the realization that your life's completely changed,
mm,
the emotional damage, for whatever better word, of the accident. was all in my body when that first race went off. And it was just that first race for me was I released all of that. And after that race, I just felt so free and so like relaxed. And I was like, yeah, okay, I've proved to myself that life is still worth living and that I can still be here in a chair and still strive for great things. Like my hashtag on my social media channels is hashtag I am Ben Pritchard. Now, a lot of people think that's very narcissistic, but when you're in hospital, having had a life-changing injury, you spend a lot of dark times internally investigating yourself or internally coming to terms with who you are and, ask yourself difficult questions, why me, all of those kind of things. And I always say that the wheelchair is the best and worst thing that's ever happened to me, because prior going into hospital and having this injury, I was a very self-conscious young man and very I'm still quite body shy or not confident, but I would really, really, really care about other people's opinions and try to be a people pleaser and do everything for other people. And then I had this accident and obviously all this period of self-reflection, and I left hospital far more confident in who I am. So now I say I am unapologetically Ben Pritchard and I am me. And I've got a sticker on my wheelchair that says people stare, make it worth it. Now, people stare because you're the only wheelchair in the room a lot of the time. Now, I spend 90% of my time around para athletes. So for me, it's my everyday norm, I'm surrounded by people that know how to act around us. Able-bodied team know about us. The staff all help. It's fairly normal. Whenever we go to a hotel or airport transfers or whatever it may be, it's always sorted. Whereas when I go to my private life and I'm with Meg, a lot of people think Meg's is either a carer or a support worker or whatever it may be. And we go on holiday and the accessible room isn't an accessible room, or the transfer is not an accessible transfer, despite everything that I've done to try and get it to work. And I think that, there's so many times when you open a door and you wheel in and people will just stare. And they're not doing it maliciously. You're just not the norm. And that's okay. But if they're going to stare, I'm going to make it worth it. I'm going to be me. And they can either like it or they can leave it. And that's up to them.
Yeah, I love that. That's again, I saw that at the end of the I am able thing, the stat. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was saying how, was it 67%?
67%, yeah.
Yeah, of people feel awkward, and it's quite horrifying, really. But I guess that's kind of the point of making it feel
prior to my accident, I didn't know anyone that lived their life in a wheelchair. And I didn't feel awkward around people in a chair. I didn't know anyone that lived in
know anyone like personally as a friend or anything.
So I wouldn't think twice at looking at drop curves. I wouldn't think twice at going to a restaurant and thinking, "Oh, can my friend in the chair get here?" But all of my friends and my family have said that's the one thing that's changed in their life, is that they're constantly now thinking, "Oh, Ben wouldn't be able to come here," or "Could Ben come here?" And so it's a good change, right? But my circle have learned that through me.
Yeah. And that was going to be one of my questions, actually, was that time in hospital, when you said you were learning a lot about yourself, what were the big things that you kind of discovered about yourself, as well as this confidence piece?
I guess a lot of it was that I lived my life for other people rather than living my life for me. And that hadn't really got me anywhere other than a good job and like my family's respect. But I realised that I'd have my family's respect no matter what I did, as long as I wasn't a KNOB. But I'd have my family's respect, and so I stopped living my life for other people. That was probably the biggest thing I realised, was that a lot of the decisions I made in my life were for other people rather than myself. Yeah.
You're speaking about your family, so your mum and your dad are obviously massive. And is Winston is still with us?
Winston passed away in August last year. He actually, that was an interesting conversation I had with the vet, because I felt so hypocritical. And I think the vet was thinking about the cost of the operation. Now, that was never a question for me. But when I was talking to him, I was like, is it worth it? Is this worth it? And he was like, and I was like, because I know this life is shit. Don't get me wrong. There are good parts to my life in chair. There are also some really terrible ones. Like, I have to use a catheter to go to the toilet. I have to using enema to go for number 2.
Yeah.
There are lots of things that I can't do for myself, and I have to have medical intervention.
Yeah.
But I can voice that this is hard. I can voice that, whereas a dog can't. But we went ahead with the surgery, um, and he did really well. He rehabbed really well, and then he'd had like 3 months where he was really good. Then he'd have a relapse. Then he'd have 3 months where he was really good. Then in the end, the vet said like, we can't continue. So unfortunately, he had to be put down. But there's a song that I like by Chris Stapleton, and it says something like, "Angels are sent down from heaven to help you, and then they pass and go when you're ready." And I like to think that, like with Winston, that's kind of, he came into my life at a time where I really needed him. I was just injured and came into my life in May 2017, and then he left my life when I was comfortable. I was happy in the chair, met Megs. I was on the way to starting a family, and then he decided that it was his time to go. And I know that sounds like really spiritual, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, no, not at all. I'll have to check it up. Yeah, because I guess that he Meg must have been just about pregnant with Evan, no, at August last year.
So he passed away just before, but then like everything happens for a reason. And if you look at, I do really believe in everything happens for a reason.
Yeah,
I really believe that. And Eva was conceived on the date of my accident, not intentionally, but like that's when it happened. And yeah, so we are very lucky for little Eva. But everything happens for a reason. And my finals this year is actually on the 10th of September. I feel like I've waffled a lot. Is there any questions you have?
No, I feel like you've literally, like, all of them have just been answered.
I like informal podcasts. I think you get a better story that way.
100%, yeah. And the last one was one which was just kind of almost a closing one, which would be what you were saying earlier about wanting to say to aspiring athletes who are wanting to be parents or wanting to work a family around it. I guess, what would you say to an aspiring athlete? And I'm sure this is probably one of those questions that you do get a lot, but has it changed? Has like the answer changed as you've got older, as to like what you would say to aspiring athletes coming into the sport, not just like rowing on?
That's a great question. Has it changed? Yeah. I think I'm a lot more sympathetic to new athletes now than I was when I was a new athlete. I think when I was in my stripes, I could be quite judgmental or critical of athletes that maybe weren't upholding good athlete behaviors. And I still uphold the standards of the squad. I will still pull people aside if they're doing something that I feel that isn't in the ethos of our group, and or that they can do better. But I'm far better at realizing people have other stuff at home, and the fact they're turning up and training may be all they have that day. So I'm far more sympathetic to that. Before I had Eva, or before I was an elder statesperson in the group, it would be all about training and nothing else mattered. Home life couldn't affect training, and training was everything. Now, some may say that I should have had that realization when I had my accident, and you do for a short period of time, but then something new comes in and you focusing on that. So I've had that stark realization again that rowing is not everything. It's a huge part of my life, and I will always be thankful for it, and I will always be a rower, and I will always be, which is new because I never used to say I was a rower. I always used to say I was a cyclist that rows, but I now feel that I am a rower.
Oh, really? That's interesting that it's changed. When did it change?
I think last year. I think when I got that bronze medal, I think I felt like I could call myself a rower. I think, So I will always be a rower, and I will always love this sport for what it's done, but it won't be everything about me. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that's changed. And I now try and encourage younger athletes to also not let it be everything about them as well. It's trying to instill that just because you put rowing to bed when you leave training or work, it's not going to fall apart.
Yeah. And
it's the same for people that work, right? People can apply that to work.
100%. I feel like that's kind of what again, I'm kind of bring it back full circle, but like I think what Helen and Simon have always instilled in TrueStart, and obviously they're founders, so it's been like hard for them. But the fact that they're on holiday in Scotland this week is so exciting, because I think they're finally at the point now where they're like, okay, we can leave, and the place isn't going to fall apart. I've got 3 days to make this place fall apart, and it's not going to happen. So,
what we do now, India.
yeah, I know. I'm like, what can I do? No, don't worry, it's going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen. But it's it's that trust. Like, the world keeps spinning without you doing X, Y, or Z. Like, whether that be rowing, or whether that be running a coffee business, or whether like crunching numbers in the city. Like, the world is going to keep spinning, and it doesn't matter if you don't think about it every day.
Yeah, I fully support that. That is like the biggest mantra at the moment, is that life is too big just to be about that.
Yeah. Oh, that is awesome. Oh, what a wicked piece to end on. Love it.
Appreciate it.
No, thank you so much for like giving up your time in the middle of a very stressful camp, and I completely get that. Rest and recovery.
I've got a question for you to end then.
Oh,
so what has been your greatest thing since joining TrueStart? What is the one thing you would change if you had the ability to? And what is the next challenge for TrueStart in the future?
Okay. Like, are we talking greatest thing and all of these in like achievements?
No, anything. It could be greatest thing. It could be anything, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Very open-ended question. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah. No, I like it. I reckon the greatest thing has been seeing it, and I think Carl and Simon have also, like, they probably will also echo this, is seeing it in the world as it's meant to be. Like, because I think I joined right after, so I was traveling in New Zealand and I came back, and it was just November 21, so the world, November 21, so the world had kind of started to go back to normal, and it was a really rocky time during COVID for the business, which I was not there for. And it'd also been the point where they'd found their feet with what they wanted to sell, and the kind of direction they wanted to go. And I think now seeing it in the world where it's meant to be, people like really getting the messaging and like loving the messaging, like loving the whole dive in bit, like really just that makes me really proud. That makes me really proud just to have seen it do that and been part of that. So I reckon that's the greatest thing. Biggest challenge was probably last December. Oh, we all melted. So it was just the three of us. So we're all going through a bit of it in our personal lives, like all three of us. And in December, like we're such a small team. We are like a little family, and like it was really hard to not bring negative in, and that was difficult. And then we all came back after Christmas, and it was like our best quarter ever. That January to April was mad, and I think it genuinely was, and we reflected on it in January. So if we hadn't gone through that really quite rubbish time in December, I reckon the three of us wouldn't be as close, and like we wouldn't have done that. So that was hard, but became really good. And then future, I'm really, really excited to see what this is going to do, and not just like a short term flip it kind of thing. Like, see how it actually grows and is itself in the future. So yeah, that's really, really long, but
you speak really passionately about it, so you obviously believe in it and you love TrueStart and the people behind it just as much as I do, so it's good to hear. If you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah, exactly. And literally does not feel like work, which is great. But no, I absolutely love it. And doing this is also like brought a whole new love to it, to be fair. Doing like getting to talk to people not solely about like coffee, and actually getting to talk to so many people that I would never get to speak to otherwise. That's really cool. But thank you so much. Can't say thank you enough. I don't know how long this has been, but an hour-ish. So thank you for giving me an hour of your time, and just you're an excellent human being. So I'll let you say bye, and then I'll stop hitting record, and then we can say bye.
Yeah. Cool. Well, to the TrueStart fans and podcast listeners, just like to say thank you for listening to me waffle on for the last hour. Hopefully there's some little bits there you can take away, and if you want to reach out more, you can jump on my website and there's a contact page, or you can hit me up through social media, which is I am Ben Pritchard on Instagram and Twitter. Or X now, is it? Not Twitter. But yeah,
No.
my social media platforms are I am Ben Pritchard. So